Hey gang, it's Shannon, and today what we're going to do is we're going to take our new chromey oil pan and install it on our Chevy 350 small block. This is a Chevy small block 350. It's got aftermarket aluminum heads, and this is a 4-bolt block, which means there are 4 bolts holding in our main bearing caps. As you can see, we have already installed our oil pump. And before we actually put the oil pump in, we put some oil into the pump and we turned it to prime the gears a little bit. We're going to prime it again later, but that's another video. So we got oil already on the gears, got it turning, and we installed our pickup screen on a vise. And you can use just a 5/8 wrench to grab this and tap the wrench on, or it's better yet to use an actual installing tool that wraps around here, and it's got a post on it that you can tap it into place. You want to make sure that it's supported on the back side, laying on the floor or on a bench or in a vise or somewhere. If you put your pump in first and then try to install this, you can actually crack the housing if you just bang on it here without supporting the ass end of it. So just something to keep in mind. When you install your oil pump, don't forget to put in your intermediate shaft, and if you have just a stock shaft with a plastic ring, make sure you get those on first. This is an aftermarket one that's all steel with a steel shaft coupler on it. When you put your pump on, you don't need a gasket or any silicone or anything on here. You want to keep all that stuff away from the oil passages. You don't want anything gumming up the works. When you get make sure you have the correct bolt for your oil pump, and it's a special shouldered bolt. And you want to put just a few drops of oil on the threads and put it in, and then you tighten it down with a torque wrench. This will be like 65 foot-pounds on the Chevy small block, just to make sure it's tight and it's not going anywhere. When you install this pickup screen, preferably on a bench or in a vise, support the back side of this pump. You can use like a 5/8 wrench and just kind of put the wrench on here on the little lip on it, and then just turn it a few times and tap it into place. It's obviously a whole lot better if you have an actual installing tool. You can pick one up at Summit Racing. They work great and a lot better than using a wrench, but just for you backyard guys, it's a little trick. As far as the angle of the dangle on this pickup screen, rule of thumb is you get it pretty much level with the block or with the seam on the pump here. If it's level, it's going to be really close to the bottom of the oil pan, which kind of oil stars it as it's trying to suck in oil. So what you want it is, we want it down, or actually when it's flipped over, up just about a 1/16 of an inch or so, maybe an 1/8 of an inch max. You want this angled towards the block just a little tiny bit so that it sucks in plenty of oil, doesn't get oil starved. You can adjust this guy with just tapping on it with a rubber mallet or whatever. Like I say, you want it just barely up a little bit. You don't want it perfectly level. You don't want it pointing down being this direction towards the bottom of the oil pan. You want it just up a little bit off the bottom of the oil pan. Again, with all mating surfaces, you want it as clean as you can get without getting a bunch of crap inside here. You know, you're going to scrape old gaskets off with a razor blade or gasket scraper, and then go over it with, I prefer the die grinder with the Scotch-Brite Wheel of Death. So, you know, I use these to go over it just to get the rest of the crap and rust off of it. And I know a lot of people don't like the Scotch-Brite pads, but, you know, it's worked for me for 20+ years, never had a problem. And when people tell me that they're worried about 20 or 30 microns of aluminum oxide getting into the engine and rotting everything and destroying the bearings and blah 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 blah, you know, there's more crap that goes into your gas tank from the gas pump than you're going to get from, you know, a Scotch-Brite pad. Not to mention the fact that, you know, antifreeze is going to turn acidic, and antifreeze will actually eat all the aluminum parts on your engine if it sits for more than a year. So just a little tip. After your surface is all cleaned and scraped, use some brake cleaner or carb cleaner. In theory, brake cleaner is supposed to be better because it doesn't have the, I don't know, chlorine or some other chemicals that the carburetor cleaner has. But just use a nice, good, clean rag, preferably lint-free, and wipe down your mating surfaces to prep it for the gaskets. So of course chrome parts are great. The only problem with the chrome parts is the chrome. Specifically on any mating surfaces where you're going to put a gasket or try to seal in fluids or something. This shiny stuff looks great on the outside, but where the gasket goes and where you're trying to seal it becomes a problem, because this is really smooth and it's kind of like a Teflon coating on a cooking pan. Just, it's not going to stick. Even with gluing gaskets on, you're still going to have a problem, so we want to fix that. What I'm going to do is use a wire wheel on a die grinder, and we're just going to hit this surface here where the gasket goes, and we just want to get the shiny stuff off. We just want to dull it a little bit, rough it up, so that our glue and our gaskets stick better. These wire wheels are great, but these bristles do come off and they will go in your eye. So even though I don't usually wear safety glasses, I always wear glasses with these, because these bristles will come off and they will go in your eye. So you can do this on the ground. This is hard, with one hand and filming with the iPhone, but you can use a bench grinder with the wire wheel if you have it. Just like I say, watch out for these bristles. Try to keep it spinning so everything's flying out of the pan, not into the pan. By the way, this little doodah here is called a windage tray. Usually they're built into the oil pan like this. What they do is they keep the oil from sloshing around and causing you problems inside the crankcase when everything's going on. Sometimes they are bolted onto the main bearing caps up here with some special bolts, but just in case you've heard the term windage tray, wasn't sure what it is, that's what it looks like. Like I was saying, those bristles do come off, and better in the pan than in your eye, but you want to make sure that you blow this out when you're all done. Make sure all those little bastards are out of there so you don't have any problems down the road. Okay, if you're using an old pan or reinstalling an old pan, you're using a used pan to put back in, you want to make sure that these guys here are flat, all these mounting holes. So yes, it's not a straight edge, but I'm just trying to make a point. So what happens is these guys will be pushed up a little bit after they've been installed, and you just want to tap these guys down a little bit. You can do it on a vise, or use like a block of wood underneath just to hold it straight, because you don't want to warp it more. But you just want to tap down, these holes here, just to make sure that these are flush, so you don't have any problems with your gasket sealing. All right, you may notice in your gasket set that there are 3 seals for your pan, and the reason for that is this one here with the lips is going to be the small one in the back. It goes next to your oil pump up here. And then you got a choice to make with these two. You've got a thick gasket and you've got a thinner gasket. Now there's a certain way to measure this space right here. You can put a straight edge across here, measure the distance, that'll tell you which one it is, blah blah blah. I've learned over 20 plus years that 99.9% of the time it's going to be the thicker gasket. But you may want to double check that and just look up how to measure straight across here and then the distance here, and that'll tell you if it's the thick gasket or the thin gasket. But like I say, odds are it's going to be this thick guy right here. Okay, it's always a good idea just to lay this stuff out first. Make sure you have the right gaskets, make sure all your holes are punched out, make sure all your holes line up, and just double check everything, make sure nothing's ripped or you have any problems, and just check all that before you start gluing stuff into place. Okay, we have our old friend, our super weather strip adhesive. We got the yellow stuff, not the black stuff, and we're going to glue these guys down. So make sure that you have it laid out the correct way. Same thing goes with valve covers and everything else. Take it up and flip it over so that you put glue on the correct side, and then we're just going to put a film of glue. Make sure it's a constant film all the way across. You don't want any gaps, because trust me, a gap will bite you in the ass later on. So we're just going to put a solid line of glue down here, flip it over, and put it on. Okay, we have our first gasket glued down, have all of our holes lined up, and we got our little notch on the end in the center so that it lines up with these little notches on this end seal. That's going to go on here, and that should fit perfect. Okay, so technically, after you put your super weather strip adhesive on here, When you're gluing down gaskets, you get it laid out how you want it, and you can lift this up, lift up the gasket for just a few seconds at a time. This product is what's called anaerobic. It hardens with air, so if you just give it a little bit of air and drop it back down, then it'll stick nice and tight. Or you can just, like I say, press it on, hold it into place, make sure your holes are lined up, and trust me, it'll seal. I'm sure the guys at 3M have other stuff to say about it, but you can look it up on their site. Okay, on this back seal right here where the gaskets meet, you want to make sure you spooge this up nice and good with the ultra gray crap. It's not about being pretty, it's about making sure this pig doesn't leak, because if it's going to leak anywhere, it will leak here on the back seal. If you want to, you can also put some super weather strip adhesive. You can put glue on here to hold it in place. It's just an extra thing, you don't necessarily need it, but I personally am just a firm believer in overkill when it comes to sealing this thing up, because I hate leaks. It's a pain in the ass. Okay, here's where our front seal goes. You can see I put some ultra gray spooge on top of and below the end of the gasket here. Just, you want to fill that in. Like I say, it's not about being neat and clean. We can wipe off the excess later. It's about making sure this pig doesn't leak. I also put some super weather strip adhesive in the groove for the seal, just as a little extra protection. You don't need to. A lot of people don't. Don't write me if you don't do it and say I'm doing it wrong. I'm just telling you, I have never had an oil pan leak doing it this way. Make sure you get that seal pressed down into the groove as best as you can. It doesn't fit perfect, it's going to stick up a little bit, but trust me, it'll even out when you put the pan on. And then make sure you get your extra layer of silicone, some ultra gray on here, and we're going to go all the way down with this, just a film of it. If you want, you can put a film on here too if you want. Like I say, it's not about right or wrong, it's not about being pretty, it's how bad you not want this pig to leak. Okay, here we have our leftover bulk bags of bolts and washers here. We got these up the street at Fastenal. You can find them online. There's other bolt suppliers online, but these are way cheaper than getting sets online or at the hot rod store or whatever. If you just buy them in bulk, they're not too bad. This bag with 50 of it was like $8. A bag of washers was like $7, so $15 for this whole set, and it'll do our valve covers, it'll do the timing cover, it'll do our oil pans. So we got those all ready to go. If you're really on a tight budget, then just get some regular bolts that go in there that aren't stainless steel. But anytime you can use stainless steel, they just look better, they don't rust, they're just a much better product in the long run. So it's up to you. I know budgets are tight, but this is a good in-between between ARP bolts at, you know, $200 a set, or some stainless steel ones. As you can see, we're all spooged up. We got a solid line of goo on our gaskets. Trust me, if you miss a spot, that's where it's going to leak. Got the corners of our seals spooged up, and we're ready to drop the pan on. Okay, another note on these bolts that go in the oil pan. These holes don't go into any oil passages or water passages, so we don't need any silicone or glue or anything on here. Just remember righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, but when you're starting a bolt, back thread it, go backwards first until you feel it click, and then once you feel it click, then you can wiggle it forward and then it screws right in, and when it goes in with your fingers, you know it's not going to be cross-threaded. Yes, these bigger bolts on the corners can be a bitch. It just takes some time to get them lined up. Just same thing, you want to make sure that you back thread them when you first start them to feel the threads catch. You may have to push down on the pan a little bit just to get it started, but you want to make sure those things spin. You don't want to cross thread these bolts, because it's a bitch if you do. Okay, now that we have all of our bolts started all the way around, we know we're all good to go. We're going to tighten these up, and we're just going to go back and forth, and we're going to go back and forth starting in the middle and work our way out in a large circular pattern until we get them all done. And when we tighten these things down, we're just going to tighten them down until they get hand tight. I'm using a 1/4 inch ratchet. You're gonna get hand tight, and then you'll just barely see that gasket start to squish out a little bit. Once that gasket just squishes out a hair, that's when you want to stop. You don't want to go past that. You don't want to torque it down too tight. Another thing that I personally like to do is, before I tighten up all these pan bolts, is I just like to put a film of some ultra gray inside this front gap where this front oil seal is. Just fill it in and then smooth it off with your finger, and then when you tighten this down, this will bulge out a little bit. I'll show you when we're done, but I hate oil leaks with a passion. Here's the back seal. You can see I just smeared some silicone in there and smoothed it off with my finger. When I tighten all this stuff down, then the silicone's going to bulge out just a little bit. It's just a little extra protection for leakage. And yeah, it's not pretty, but nobody's going to see this stuff. If this oil pan leaks, people will see that. You can see as I tighten this down, that gasket just barely starts to bulge out, and that's when you want to stop. That's as tight as you want to go. If you look down our gasket here, you can see where the gasket just barely bulges out where the bolts are. That's as tight as you want to torque these things down, and you don't want to go past that. We've got our extra layer of sealer here with our silicone in the front seal gap there, just as an extra protection, because I hate leaks. And that's how you install a chrome oil pan. Here's a couple quick things as a postscript. Keep in mind, when you're putting chrome parts on your engine, chrome is not a color. Basically, it's a mirror. So when you decide whether or not you're going to paint color inside your engine compartment, you may want to consider color. Don't paint the engine compartment black, because chrome, all it does is reflect the colors that are around it. For instance, here's chrome. If you have red around it, the chrome becomes red. So if you got a lot of red, it's going to look red. If you have your whole engine compartment black, all it does is it's just going to reflect black, and the chrome becomes black. So something to think about before you buy chromy parts. And as a very last note, if this is a brand new engine you're putting in, remember you're going to have to change this oil after 500 miles. And when you do that, just make sure you double check all your bolts. Just put a 1/4 inch ratchet on them and just snug them up.